Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We are starting a little late today. My name is Amanda Rawson, and I am so excited to have you all here as we celebrate our Artists Honoring Women. I'm going to start the conversation today with our land acknowledgement. We would like to begin this program by recognizing that while we gather in the Santa Clara County, we are gathered on the ethno-historic tribal territory of the Tamian Ohlone, which included the lands of the Paleños and who were related to the direct ancestors of the lineages enrolled in the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, who were also missionized into Mission Santa Clara, San Jose, and San Francisco. The lands on which Santa Clara County are established was and continued to be of great significance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe of San Francisco Bay Area. We also recognize that the ancestors of the Muwekma Ohlone constructed and maintained the 3 Bay Area missions. Thank you for joining us again today. I want to speak on what is womanhood first before we go into our conversation and I introduce our guest. Womanhood is a public art and digital media project that will commission interactive, educational, and accessible artifacts and public artworks to promote the historical representation and recognition of women in Santa Clara County. What is Artists Honoring Women? Artists Honoring Women is a program under Womanhood, a Santa Clara County-wide arts-centered project that will recognize the historic contributions of Santa Clara County women across all intersectional identities to the region and beyond. To find out more about this project, Womanhood Project, go ahead and visit the project's website at www.womanhoodproject.org. And you can sign up there for emails to keep informed on what's coming next and our in-person programs we will hopefully be doing very soon. I am very, very excited to introduce today's guest, Sheila Levrant de Bretteville. Sheila is the first tenured woman at the Yale University School of Art, where she is the Caroline M. Street Professor, a title she accepted because the city's streets are where her site-specific installations have taken place in Los Angeles, Los Angeles' Little Tokyo neighborhood, New York's A Train, Rhode Island, and at the Hong Kong Design Institute in Russia. Her work is in the special collections of libraries and museums, among the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Centre Pompidou, and is frequently exhibited in museums such as Graphic Design in America and Hippie Modernism, The Search of Utopia at the Walker Museum. Now dig this. Art in Black Los Angeles, 1960 to 1980 at the Hammer Museum, and MoMA New York, WAC. Art and Feminist Revolution at Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art, and PS1 in New York, in Nasty Women at the New Haven Institute Library. Sheila was designated as a distinguished alumna by Barnard College, where she received her BA in the History of Art, Design Legend by the American Institute of Graphic Arts, awarded honorary doctorates from 5 American universities of art and design of the United States, and given a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Women's Caucus for the Arts. Thank you so much, Sheila, for being here and being patient with us this morning as we were getting ready for this presentation.
Thank you for being so patient.
Of course, of course.
So easy. No,
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to share the work I've been doing. And I don't have a preview. I think I'd rather go right to the first image and then keep going.
Yeah.
Is that
So
okay?
I'm gonna step out, and we are gonna go ahead and we are going to move forward with our presentation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I chose to start with 1974 because in 1973 I said bye-bye to Cal Arts and said I gave up my job in order to initiate the Women's Graphic Center at the Women's Building because I was one of the founders. And I'm really very proud to have done that. Next. So I want to be sure that you understand that whether I did it in paper or I did it in different materials, I've always tried to have a wide variety of voices speaking and not only speak for myself. And I've enjoyed doing that. So this is a poster. This is part of a poster about the color pink. And I went around all of Los Angeles and pasted it up on any kind of boards I could find. And so people were able to write in the blank pages. But pink is a color that is usually associated with women, but lots of women don't want to be associated. And the way they express it is when you if you scrape, if you scrape pink, you get blood, it bleeds. So it's really way of looking at the color and how you relate to it. And many people didn't want to relate to it as well. So next. And then I wanted to talk to you. I mean, I'm wearing one of these necklaces. They still only cost about $2 to get because it's an eye bolt and a keychain, that's all. And they were given out at the Women's Building to all the people who came to this conference, because it was a whole week of conferences. And I don't know if you can read it, it's big enough on your screen, but this was a conference that really was about the ways in which the women thought life as a maker of art and design would take place over the next decade. And so one of the things that's important for me to mention is that I had been doing print graphics up until this point, but I saw the opportunity to actually do things that were permanent in the public space rather than just run around the city putting up posters myself. Next, please. So the first project I did was about a woman who people in the African-American community knew quite well because she founded the first AME church, but almost no one else did. And I did this project about her because there was a fair amount of text that had been written about her experience by Dolores Hayden, who created a group called Power of Place. And I think I want to show a little bit more of it so that you get a sense of what her life was. Can you next? So it's now a park. They've now made this is at the or if you're in LA, you can enter the building through Spring Street because it's actually between two streets, but off of Spring Street. And I chose to organize the materials about her because you could see her face from Spring Street at that time. I don't know. I haven't been on that street in a while, so I don't know if you still can. But she was someone who was born a slave and walked across the United States and won her freedom in Los Angeles. And there was a doctor in the audience during the trial for her freedom, and he hired her to be the midwife. And therefore, she brought into the world quite a few of people in that period of time. Next, please. And one of the things that I did was to be able to actually make the material receptive so that you could actually, if you were blind, you could feel it and know it. And if you were there and you could see, you could actually touch everything. And it felt to me like I was making a book in the street that was available to everyone, and everyone could touch it, and they didn't have to turn pages, they just had to walk along it. And this is actually a friend of mine, Angela Pickett, this her sister, and her sister, and therefore her nephew, and obviously her sister's explaining that these are the things that were inside her bag as a midwife. Next, please. And this gives you a sense of some of the things of the ways I did it. Like, for instance, I made a image of a agave plant by going up Laurel Canyon and cutting leaves and then bringing them back down and assembling what looked like a plant. And in fact, it did look like a plant. So just to give you a sense of how receptive just plain old concrete is. But concrete lasts, and you can go and see you can see that project yourself, and also you could see one that Betty Saar did, because Betty and I both did projects there. And actually, she has a bottle that I had to make again out of a more receptive material that you just saw the image before. The bottle that's inside the bag that Biddy Mason would have been carrying around in order to bring children into the world. The next, please. After that project, I did this one in Little Tokyo, and it's really about, this was before many people knew that people of Japanese descent were all sent away for no reason, no good reason. That the President of the United States didn't bother to come and see whether what they had heard was true, and so they were actually put in camps, most of them in the Midwest. And so this is where they lived before then, because they had come and had been actually running companies that grew flowers. So forestry was really what a lot of people did. But in these particular buildings, in front of each doorway, it tells you who was working there over these 4 decades. Of course, the decade that you see is dark is the one that's about being removed from their own neighborhood. And then there are quotes from people of 3 different generations of Japanese. And when I won this project, I asked Miho, why are you choosing a white person to do this project? And he said, because I want everyone to know about this. I don't want it to be only for Japanese people. On the other hand, I felt badly about being the only one. So the 2 other artists who were Japanese, their work was integrated into this project as well. Next, please. And so there were images as well. This what you're seeing on the right is one of the ways in which people put their things together to come to the United States and to Los Angeles, and then again to bring their things with them to the camps. And you can see that I was very careful to write that when this happened, and you can see that the FBI was looking for evidence. They never found the evidence of disloyalty, and that didn't stop them from putting people into other camps. Next. Oops. At that point, after doing the one in Little Tokyo, I moved in 1990 to New Haven, and as I didn't know. I mean, I came to actually change the program that was here, which was a totally modernist program, into one that was more variegated by the differences that occurred between each of the students coming from different places and having different histories, that they should do work that had to do with themselves and how they thought. And so while I was there, there was an RFQ because the Percent for Art ordinance had passed in 85, and I applied, and I said that I would put it was $25,000, that I could do 24 stars of people who worked in that area, which they call the Ninth Square. They named it the Ninth Square because there were not. New Haven is made of 9 squares, and this is considering the 9th square. But you probably can't read the one about Ezekiel Scott, but the people who I chose, I had to find. So like Ezekiel Scott, I actually found because they listed all the people who were working and actually mentioned their race, of all things. And so I knew he was Black, and I could actually write about what he did. And so all the stars relate to it. The one I'm standing in front of is Joseph Mcalpine, and I went to visit him in the VA. He unfortunately was blind at that point, and so he couldn't see what I was doing, but he certainly could hear what I was doing. And he was a janitor at the New Haven gas company, and he got the people. He represented the people who could pay the bills but couldn't pay it all at one time. So he got the people who in charge to let people be able to pay little by little, and therefore the people could get their gas, and the company got the money. So he was a very thoughtful person who knew how to negotiate for his people. And it was interesting to me that one of the workers who was, pouring the concrete around the stars, said, you made a janitor, a star for a janitor? I said, well, read what he did. Next, please. Then this is a project that is unusual for me because it was for, it was there with the RFQ, which is a request for qualifications for doing a public project, was in Boston in the State House. And they had decided that there were 7 women that they were going to honor. And I made a proposal. At first, I had asked a woman of color who I knew if she would work with me, and she said she couldn't. And so I picked somebody who was a good deal younger than I to work with me, because I felt that these are people who did things for others, that I should do this with another person. So I did it with Susan Sellers and Dorothea Dix, Lucy Stone, Sarah Paul Remond, Josephine Pear Ruffin, Mary Kennedy O'Sullivan were the women. 2 of the women are Black women. And when I proposed my solution to the project, and can you go to the next slide? Which was to have all the women in a row. They said, how will they know if they're Black? I said, everyone will be Black because I'm using bronze. Everyone's a person who is brown. And so you can tell by what they did and who they did it for. So these are texts, and they had designated this area for this project. So these panels that are on a wallpaper, and you'll see the wallpaper. The wallpaper is about the laws that their work changed. And the next slide will show you two of them more close up, Lucy Stone and Dorothea. And they all are quoted, and then you can see in the back are pages from legal documents about the laws that their work changed. I'm going to go quickly because you sort of wanted to see more kinds of ways in which doing something in a public sphere would be not something about what I thought about, but what the people in that place needed and what I could do in relationship to it. I found out when I went to the site on Kissinger in not Long Island. It's at the end of the A train, actually, which I'll tell you about later. But it's in Queens, and most of the people had been very recently immigrated to the United States, and the ones who had been there earlier had usually some organization that represented them, and so they were going to build this brand new public library for people who come from countries where there's no such thing as a public library. So how would they ever know that they were welcome in this building? Because the library didn't mean anything to them. So I went to each of the different representatives and to schools also to find out what book from where they had lived they thought everybody knew. And so there are 35 different titles. When it's like only a name, I use just the name, but usually I do it in the language that it's in, and also in English. And there are 35 different languages that are here, and there's enough space if they wanted to add more after this project was done, then they could do that. So you can probably see some of them, like Le Petit Chaperon Rouge is Little Red Riding Hood. So, and they're all there. I'm sure if you are of a different ethnicity, you probably find the book that everyone that you know knows is there. Next, please. This is a project for a set of buildings that used to be a workhouse. And when I went to the library and found the dossier about that workhouse, I discovered that almost 90% of the people tried to get out of there. So it probably was a pretty awful place to be. And now, and instead, it was going to be the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training. And this is at the point when computers were just being used, and when people, and people were losing, usually people who had lost their job came to the Department of Labor and Training in an effort to find a new job. And people were talking about how they would learn to be computer oriented. And that seemed absolutely crazy to me. And I couldn't figure out what I could do that would make people think about what they needed in order to be able to earn a living. And so there is a sort of an area in the center, because the buildings sort of separate around, and I made seats that you could sit in, and it could be I can work or can we work, because you could see it from above as well as below. And these are a little sort of cushions that you can put on the that you could get from the cafeteria if you wanted to sit and have lunch. So that because these are all cut stone, and so it can be cold if it's a cold day. So you had cushions. So it says it's really take a break, out to lunch, back to work, because this is where people would often have their lunch. And you see that star that's in the middle there. It's actually a lazy Susan. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see how it works. So it's a lazy Susan made out of, it actually works. It allows you about 1,000 different combinations, like if workers, if managers, what each group might do. And then you move it would only, or just, or, and then what do you do? Walk out, or, other things. And then the last one is then the person who's sitting there would be, then I wouldn't do what that person would have done. I would have done something else or whatever. So that you can see that it opened up discussion, because people could just turn the different parts of the circle around and make 1,000 different sentences, because I certainly didn't know what the solution would be. And this is a way that people could please invite how to invite discussions among the people who are there. And it's still working. It's still there, which is really terrific as far as I'm concerned. Next. This is a project that I really, really love doing. It's for the A train in New York. It's the longest train. It's the longest line in all of the kinds of trains that move through New York. And it's at the very, very beginning, or it's at the very, very end, depending on your point of view. And so I put at the start, ... and also at long last, ... Because the people who are coming from that part of New York, which is the very tip of it, near well, anyway, at any rate, what I'm really trying to say is that I wanted to give people something that would be of interest to them. And I also wanted them to resonate with them. So after at the start, there are these 3 dots. And after that, if you go to the next slide, you'll see what happens. There are one of the tiles has a text. And so I'm glad that you spoke for the Native Americans that are where you are. But this is a woman who is a Native American, and they were having their powwows up in the park that's there at 207th Street. So I really identified with her, because I really don't like things that are done for show. I like things that are done because they really mean something to the person who's doing it. And clearly the powwow meant something to her, but she didn't want it to be for show. And I appreciated that. And then the other one, I'm just going to show you 2 out of the 207 of these. One of them is from Sheila Levrant, because she's actually the wife of one of the men who are on the committee that chose me. And that committee actually had seen the Biddy Mason project and assumed that it was done by a person who was Black. And so they were very surprised when I walked in, and I happened to be a white person. And I explained that actually that someone who was Black also did a project, just a different one than the one that I did. One that Betty did was more about Biddy Mason's open hand and about the fact that her house was there. And mine was a weaving of it into the city of Los Angeles over time. And so so there's more from this project to see, because it's a big station. They were trying to make it into 2 stations so that there would be some place in the middle where people who had been on working on the trains could actually have a place to stay and have lunch or dinner or things like that. So next one, please. So here's the "at long last" part. It goes "at long last," and it continues, and there are more quotes. And then I gave a talk about my work when I was at Barnard, because when I got that award, and I wasn't feeling very well that day, and so I was talking about the 207th Street station, and I said, "Anybody in this audience know that station?" And this woman, Frances, got up, and this is what she said. And she sent it to me as an email, that her favorite was "at long last," because usually I'm dragging home long past dinner time. And when I get to that wall and I look at it, I sigh and repeat the words. It makes me feel that the universe is empathetic with my feelings about the day. More importantly, it makes me smile. And so she thanked me. And it was just, it's the only, I don't go back and, do some kind of a test to find out how people are seeing my work over time. But this was such a wonderful thing to know that you could write something like "at long last," and it could really resonate with the people who actually are there. Next slide, please. And there's a railing that goes around the stairs to the train, and in it I describe Billy Strayhorn, who wrote the Take the A Train, which is a jazzy kind of piece of music. So the music is there, and that's also the words that were there. So you can see the part that's here, which is "get aboard the A train to take a little ride around the city," which is probably a more joyous thing than many of the people who come from from someplace else in the city on this longest line as well. Next slide. And in addition to that, at the time that I did the research for the 207 quotes that are on the walls, the person who had spoken to me when he met me said I should look at the Taino culture, because the vast majority of the new immigrants who are at 207th Street were actually from the Dominican Republic or from Mexico. And so they share the Taino culture. And in looking at it, I found this image of actually, it looked like people who were blowing horns, but they're probably smoking something to give them a high. And so I put a piece of terrazzo into the tiles just below the railing. So it's like they are playing the music for what's written on the tiles. Next, please. And as you enter or exit, embedded into the concrete, the panels that are there is the same thing. So as you enter, it says "at the start," and when you leave, it says "at long last." And the feet over there are the feet of an arts administrator who was from the city, and you'll see him soon. Next, please. So the next project is one for Yekaterinburg. And what happened is that the arts administrator had said that I could talk to anybody, so I could go to a country where I don't know the language. The truth of the matter is, I know a teeny weeny little bit of Russian because my parents are both immigrants from. My mother's from Warsaw, and my father's from a farm up the northern part of what became Poland. And so I actually know words from a Russian lullaby, but that's about it. I don't know much more than that. But I worked with students, and they are part of this project. I'm not showing everything because I didn't want to go on and on and on, because I'd love to talk with the people in real time. But this is the place that it was. So they asked me to see two places, and I chose this one, which is a tower that used to be a water tower for the train that would go by when the trains were being used were steam engine trains. And so this was at the opening when it was raining, actually. So next one. And so these are the people who were involved. So this is the person on the far left is the arts administrator. The person next to him is the person who owned a concrete factory, because he knew that I had done things in concrete. And Arseny is the one on the other side of me, who is an artist and sort of represents the art world. He actually moved to Moscow shortly after. And then next, please. So I decided that what that particular building needed was a better step. And it actually is funny that it's the word step, because steppe is the part of Russia that this is in. And so I worked with some students, and they wrote what they felt in what's called a shashtushki, which is a 4-line poem. And then if we go to the next slide, you can see that I in the middle of the night, I realized I didn't have enough time to cut all the letters. So what I did is I only cut the letters for the first letter of each word, and then left space for the remaining of that word. And so at the day of the opening, there's a place nearby where there's chalk, actually, a dispensary for chalk. One of the students wrote in these words. But of course, when the rain came, it washed it away, and all you have are the beginnings of the words. And I went back to the United States, and then I got an email from Arseny telling me that that poets in the city had adopted this part of the step, and they were writing poetry using these letters, which was really wonderful to hear. Next, please. So we're coming toward the end. One of the things that I don't like about New Haven, where I live, is that in the summer, when the students leave, there's hardly anybody in the street. And I like people. I like people in the street. And my work is in the street. So I used to go to Hong Kong every 3 years when I had a triennial leave. And I have a friend who taught at this particular school. And this school had just been built in a big fancy building. And I found the students didn't have any place to sit. So they were lying on the ground in different parts of the building to just chat and look at their cell phones. And so I went to the head of the school and I said, "What are you doing? There's one of this buildings, one of the rooms around the center core is nothing's in there. What are you planning?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Maybe I start a kind of food design class. What do you want to do with it?" I said, "I think they could do with a lounge, a place where they could hang out, talk to each other, and also to, get to know each other as well. And so if you can see a little green thing that looks over there in the corner, that little green thing is actually a LED strip that went through along one whole part of that wall. And so that when they're sitting there, because it was a school, I send everybody a note saying, tell me what's your favorite conjunction, because in English, you can use conjunctions and put them at the beginning of a sentence, but in Chinese, you can't. They actually link two parts of a sentence. So I found all the different ways in which you could say "and" in Chinese, the things that, and then different ways in which it could be, I could use it in conjunction. And actually something really wonderful happened at the last thing. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that this is, those are the green ones with the dots on either side are the conjunctions. And then in between that, you can put anything you want in English or in Chinese. And so, but the students found it fascinating. And the first night was something really wonderful that I never expected happened. And it's the next one, the next slide. If you push this, it's a video. So you have to click on it. So it'll, I sure as hope it's going to go. If it is a video. Oh, damn. Well, on mine it goes. So unfortunately, what you're not seeing, which is it says here that MC Yan, who was a Hong Kong hip hop pioneer activist, and his friend Phil, they got on either side of one of the statements that they had put in, and they walked with it, as if they were pushing it all along. And I'm so sorry you can't see it. When I show this other times, it did work. I'm sorry. And this is the last slide, because I thought it would be interesting since I started with print. I was interviewed for a book about design that also people always ask me about feminism as well. And I had done something for Yale because the dean asked me to do a logo for the 50th anniversary of women first coming to, because this was an all boys school when women first came here. And I said, I don't do logos. I'm not interested in working for corporations. And then I realized that I could ask all the students who that I knew about from each year to make a typeface, because letter form design is one of the things that we teach in our program. And so we have like 150 different letter forms being used. And actually they have been used when I sign off on an email, I use a different one each time. So it was never a singular thing, because I'm not interested in just individual people alone. I'm interested in making these differences between people be evident in the things that they do and say, because that's what makes life rich. And so this is a print version of it. And of course, if you read the text, she's asking me about in 1993, you wrote a feminist design. Could you describe feminist design as a set of formal tactical moves? And what is feminist design? I said, first of all, what is feminism? In my understanding, feminism acknowledges the past inequality of women. It's not past, unfortunately, but it's still ongoing. But I don't want it to continue into the future. And the issue of equality broadens beyond women to involve the equality of everyone. So I'm not unhappy that this is the text that is on the opposite side of this image, and it's a book on design education. And I did it. This was done with Laura Coombs, who's one of the graduates of the program. I like working with other people, as you can tell. Thank you.
Wow, Sheila. Wow. First of all, thank you so much. That was incredible. I am so grateful, and I know that my colleagues are as well, to get a chance to see your work. I know Barbara's been aware of your work, and I have had the opportunity to actually go and search with a friend of mine when I was in Los Angeles before COVID, and to look for the Biddy Mason public artwork. And I have to say, it was a little bit of a struggle to find, but I found it. And when I did, it was absolutely worth it. And it was incredible. It really was this, for me, this magical story, and very sad, and but also very sad, because it seems as though before your work, maybe not as many people knew about it in the community, but the African American community knew about her story, and it's an important one, right? And so it just, I was able to see it and also teach somebody who lives in Los Angeles about it. So that felt really great. That felt really great. And to learn about your other works and see the thread that goes through all of them. For me, a lot of what I was hearing was your ability to connect with community, connect with history, this telling the story, as well as your choice of material. I thought was really, I actually wrote that down. I'm looking down at my notes I was writing as I was turning the slides for you. The cement, the concrete, and then when you spoke about not, the powwow comment, right? The not flashy, and so it all made sense. And I just am really grateful for definitely being able to hear you share those pieces and the stories behind them a little bit more specifically. But I think for this conversation, I would love to hear a little bit more about how did you engage with the community members in some of your projects? We clearly heard towards the end the ones where maybe you didn't know the language, but maybe start with the ones with the here in stateside, on, on your engagement process, and what did that look like?
I had a translator.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes,
I had a translator who helped me, because being able to say something in Russian was not really my skill set. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what I do is like. But I can do, in a way, I just, when I have an idea of usually these projects are site specific. I have to find out what was that going on at the site. Mm-hmm. And so I usually have to go and find out all about it. I mean, the last one I did in Los Angeles is where they built they took down an old auditorium that had actually been used for I think Bruce Springsteen had sung there 35 times, but wow. I also were there when Serena was killed, and to honor her. And they also had Japanese, sportsmen doing. Every ethnicity that has lived there has had something happen in their place, as well as different performers who were there, and also basketball players and everything. So when they tore it down, a lot of people felt very like something was taken away from them, even though there's a very large Latino population, and soccer is very popular among Latinos. That a soccer stadium was going to replace it was not enough. So I got a call from a woman who was an arts administrator, who was actually a young woman when I did the Little Tokyo project. So she remembered that I can talk to people even when I don't know what the language is. I find other people who do know what the language is and can help me. I just ask and speak to a lot of people to find out what's important to them, and what they want known.
Yeah.
Like for the Little Tokyo, the 3 generations, Issei, Nisei, and Yansei, think entirely different things about the internment and about that neighborhood. They want the history told, but they think they had different experiences there as
Yeah.
well. So it's interesting to be able to give back to them in something that's lasting, that all the generations could value. So it wouldn't be for just people my age or younger than me or older than me. It'd be for everybody who at that time wanted to hear about it. And when I came to New Haven, the RFQ just was for this new neighborhood that they were building, that had been hadn't been destroyed, but the buildings weren't in great shape, and so they built some new buildings there, and there was a lot of work that it was going to be done. And I just went to the library to find out who had been, because you can find these dossiers that have information about who did what on what street. So, and also I wanted to represent all the different ethnicities in New Haven, because most people just hang with their own kind. They don't know about the other ones.
Yeah.
And so the ones, of course, that were early, I had to find out who they were. And then the ones who were, as I said, I went to the Veterans Hospital to see the brother, because his brother told me that his brother was in the hospital. And so I was so surprised. I brought him a sample of what it was going to be, and then I realized he was blind, but he certainly was aware, and he was really wonderful to talk. He was very excited that he was going to be remembered in this way. And then somebody else came and was going to take him down to, I think, to do something, I don't know, some sort of game that they play that he could participate in. And so he went down with the guy. So I really, it's a lot of research. In each of these places, I've had to go and find out who was here and what did they care about and what's important to them. And what was funny at this last project, the Bruce Springsteen thing, is that I had a whole wonderful idea that had to do with having a group of 6, because there were like 6 different ethnicities that the first person who came near the first set, they would set off the light around each of the ones. But the LA was going to charge me, but my entire
budget,
for one of them, they wouldn't support the electrical part that I wanted, which I thought would really be wonderful. So for me, the making the different, I have one of them around here, plaques that went into the ground, just the name of the person, just when they were there. Those are all in front of the main entrance. And then I said, since I've done things like this already, I want to do something else. Can I do a little video, because I found so many amazing photographs. And so I did a video that's when you go into the store to buy soccer materials, there's also a place there with the video. It's on my website. And then people are you see all the people who are there, the best woman basketball player, the best male basketball player, the people who are there with Serena, Serena, all of the things are all there. And it was fun for me to do it. One of my graduates helped me, because I hadn't done that kind of video, but he knew what I was trying to do, and he helped me do it. He's actually back in Korea now. And so, I find help.
Yeah. I mean, so I have an art history background. I admire your want to tell a story and to research about those who are, you're trying to learn about, and how to use art to tell the story. I definitely resonate with that. So I can see, I could feel the energy and the passion, because I find myself having that as well, especially when we were looking at all the work you're presenting. I wanted to speak a little bit on a little bit more on the material and accessibility. I think you in the Biddy Mason, and then as we move forward, and you spoke a little bit about the man who was blind, the veteran. Is it you know is that something that you think about at the beginning when you start a project, when you're thinking about the way community is engaged, or how the community will engage with your artworks? Are you keeping in mind who is there, who is present, or who might visit, um, and who's going to touch with their eyes closed or listen, or all of our senses? Is that something that you keep in mind?
Yeah, no, it's part of what makes it fun for me to do, to get to know it. And actually, usually, like as I said about Julio telling me, it's his wife who wrote the one about that, she didn't want to be in it. She didn't want to be with only people just like herself, kind of thing. Because I met her because she was also living there. No, it's the materials always have to do with the site. For instance, like in the train station, the train station was actually, I had the architect like this. Had a fit because he wanted to have a red stripe that went around every single one of these things. I said, well, it can't be where I'm going to put type. So we're not going to have the red stripe there. He really just had a fit. It was like amazing. I said, I've seen this before. There's somebody else I know who got on the floor like a child and just kicked his feet. He was so angry. I mean, people do all kinds of crazy things as well. But it's just people who don't know how to handle their feelings. That's all. It's not anything major really going on there. It's just something you wish you weren't in the room because probably they will be sorry that you saw this happen. And so most of the time, it made sense to integrate it into the material of what's actually there, and the things that are in concrete. Everyone knew that I knew how to deal with concrete. Concrete is an incredibly wonderful material because it's so receptive. I mean, that I could get a thing that looked like a agave plant that was there, all those things. I had to change the material that the thing that I want, like you can't put wood in because they told me that you'll spend the rest of my life picking the wood out after the concrete went in. So I had to make that out of something else. So I learned about some things from the work people who were going to pour it. Actually, it was one of the things that happened at the Little Tokyo project was really interesting because the people who were pouring that concrete in all the different colors that I did were actually all Latinos, and I don't remember what happened, but they got into arguments with the people who were from the city. And so the woman from the city came down and she said, it's amazing that you can keep everybody calm. I said, well, they have to remember what they're good at and give them rewards for it. It's because I went and got some beer and brought it back and they were at each other again. It was like, wait a second here. I'm not going to give you the beer. You're not going to. Because it was a really hot days, doing it. And it was hard work. And the way that it was made is that each letter was on a metal stick that was attached to one full piece of metal, so that every letter would not move when you poured the concrete. And so, these were smaller letters because they're about this much for each a decade was about, I'd say, 4 inches, maybe max. And so they had to be very careful, and they were careful.
Yeah,
They really were incredibly careful. There's a nice article about it in a book that it's called Art Without Architecture or something like that. I have to look at it. It was by Deborah, who is the head of architecture here, wrote it with someone else. And Princeton University Press published it. And I have that project's in that in there.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah.
Actually, we have a question here. It's I'm going to go ahead and ask that from somebody who's writing in, and I want to invite people who are watching on Facebook and YouTube, go ahead and type in any questions or comments or thank yous or whatever it may be, and we will be able to share it with Sheila here. So it's interesting that you've created open-ended projects that people can participate in and complete for a short time by building words and phrases. What inspired you to create projects like that?
Can you explain everything about yourself to someone else? I'm interested in people. I often have lectures that start with a printed circuit because it has resistors, which I'm not, and connectors, which I am, because there are both kinds of people around. And I always actually use this book. This guy who's a Los Angeles jazz musician, and I love his jazz, but I also like he wrote the story of his life, and it's a really amazing. His name is Horace Tapscott.
Okay,
and I can play if you want.
Horace Tapscott.
I've had given lectures where the people are going into their seats, and the printed circuit is on the screen, and they're hearing the jazz music. Because there was a show in London that was about California that made California sound like it was a dreamland. And I was thinking, not for everyone.
Sorry, I have to laugh.
Yeah. And so I have pictures of how people in the African American community have been treated by the police. It's been awful. Right. And I said, you can't say that a place is without looking at all the people. You can't do that. You can't just pick and choose unless you're trying to, I don't know, sell cars or something like that. But if you're trying to show a true picture of a certain place, you have to tell the whole story. You can't just tell the part that you relate to.
Right. Exactly. And that kind of speaks to the work that you did. I was writing it down, and let's see, it's the one at Boston State House, right? Yeah. It's I think it was very that one hit me. It really pulled strings in my heart in the sense of that you treated everybody as equal. The women, you saw them as equal. That somebody had said, we're not going to know who's the Black woman, right? Or who are the Black women, and I admire that.
But you can also tell by what they did and who
they did
for.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of them ran a newspaper for people who are Black. I mean, so she was really trying to talk to her community. And other ones really worked in the factories and trying to help people who were being oppressed in the factories. So people really were all the ones that were chosen were women who had done something for other people. That they never not have to be the same. Like the person wasn't crazy, the one who was dealing with people who needed help with their emotional lives. So I wanted it to be seen as part of the rest of the other people, because all the other people are men. And they're all done in bronze. So why couldn't we be done in bronze? Didn't seem like any problem. But yeah, I was very happy to win that project, and I was very happy to work with Susan on it. It was really terrific. And then because I have friends in the law school here, they helped me get it into the library so I could really look up those laws and then take pictures of the book, of the pages, so I could do that. Yeah. So, then the only thing they've done now is they've put a bench in front of it so that people can't get as close, because people came up there and they wanted to touch.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very heartening. I mean, because there's a stairway that goes down that you come up into that area. And I once was coming up, and I heard this thing of British women saying, "Oh, it's a woman. Oh, they're all women."
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it was really lovely.
Isn't that amazing? The way
Yeah,
that you get the chance, you get the way you get to see people, or how people engage with public art,
yeah.
right? And they might not even think that they may not even realize that they're looking at public art. Right? So I think some people who don't work, the way we work in the arts and we're around it, and it's probably for a lot of us, it's part of our everyday when we walk down the street
Well,
and
that's
see
why
something.
Francis writing me that email was so touching, because I don't go back and do studies on what people after how they relate to the things,
Yeah,
and when she told me that, it was so touching
yeah,
that just those 3 words, that someone else knew that you could really be tired at the end of the day, you
yeah.
know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to mention before I forget, with our project, Womanhood, that project is a county-wide project, and really the end goal is to have um, uh, permanent public art structures. And I hesitate to say monuments because of all the conversations that have been going
No, it's
on,
not a
but
monument. It is
no.
not
No,
monuments.
we are recognizing the contributions of women's work in our county, and that can be in any form where we are recognizing them. And I think part of our conversation has been, how do we recognize a group of women without maybe uh, doing one singular person? Because so many women have made contributions, not just to, of course, our Santa Clara County here that we live in, but throughout our state, our nation, and the world. And so, I think hearing you speak on this what you did in the Boston State House, that kind of makes me start thinking, like, what are these different ways of how we can honor women as a group? And maybe they weren't women that were people who would recognize their names right away, but they made these contributions, or just the fact that they're women on a wall, right? That obviously
Actually,
made a
of the 24 stars, there are quite a few women. One woman just got divorced and then built her life again. I mean, they weren't always, and actually, like the janitor. I
right.
mean, it was out of the blue that I found out what he had done. So it's, I think if you have like somebody from each ethnicity,
Hmm.
then everyone from that ethnicity, like one of the ones actually, the person who poured the concrete didn't do a good job, and it's an African American woman, and it was falling apart, and the city went and plastered over it with concrete without even telling me. And I feel terrible. I feel like it's, she was someone who actually ran some kind of a shop, and she helped
Hmm.
people learn how to sew on sewing machines. And she made a contribution to people that they got a skill set from her,
Right.
and
Right.
I actually was sitting next to her granddaughter
Wow.
at the opening. So I just feel like terrible about it, but I can't go and dig out the concrete.
Right.
And also all the companies that I used at that time, of course, are no longer here
Mm,
in New Haven, so I couldn't even find someone to replace it. And so some of the stars have lasted. One of the things is I didn't know about. I hadn't lived in the East Coast for so many 20 years, so I didn't know. I think the things that are embedded in the ground go through much more troubles here than
yeah.
they do in LA. But
Yeah.
actually, I was deeply touched by Elizabeth Alexander. She wrote an article in the New York Times, and she said that she liked this project that I had done in New Haven better than the Vietnam Memorial. I almost fell over.
Wow. Wow. That's
This line is about everyday people, and
yeah.
it's not about war. It's not
Right.
about who died. It's
Right.
really about how people lived here,
Right.
and they did different things, and they made the best of whatever they could,
Right.
and they did it the best. Then you found out that there was a cigar wrapping, because then cigars were made in New Haven because
Oh.
they grew the materials before, and then they had to be made into cigars. And she was the one who did cigars.
Wow.
But so not everything actually, nothing's been totally rude. I've done about 6 other projects in this. Another one is up in Boston is really about the West Enders who their whole neighborhood was torn apart, and they stayed together but through a newspaper for very, very long time. And so the thing was really about they had the greatest neighborhood this side of heaven is what they felt. And actually that's embedded in the concrete, so they can't get rid of it. It's on the side of the highway that goes right through there.
Wow.
So but I have actually tapes of interviews that were done with the people from the West End. It's still here. Wow. I still have them, so I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I'm going to have to do something because I don't want my son to have to deal with all the things that I've collected over time. But I've learned a lot about different places but usually it's because there's been a request for responses. Proposals.
Yeah.
It's like the one at the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training. I mean, I came home and I said, I can't solve this problem. They can't solve the problem. What am I supposed to do there? If I tell about the prior people who were there, they're not going to relate to those people. Right. They were not. I went through all these things, and 90% of the people who were in that place wanted to get out of it. It had to be pretty terrible. And so the people who are coming, I don't know what they're telling them, how they're helping them. So I had to make it be something that people could discuss, right. Because some people have technical skills and some people don't have technical skills. Yeah. I'm married to someone who has way better technical skills than I. He's an architect.
No, I understand. Yeah.
So, but I now there is no longer usually at the administrative level of a city anyone who is doing percent for art projects. So there isn't. Because I went after a couple of them and I didn't get them. So I asked one of the women who I knew from having done the 207th Street station. I asked her, you were there. Why do you think I didn't get the project? And she said, half the people wanted you and the other half people wanted something that could be seen from really far away. And you don't do that kind of thing. That's true. I could do it, but I'm not going to get it's not my thing. So I understand if people are not interested in something that is embedded in the culture of the place, rather than making everybody say, "Oh, that's where that big fancy funny thing is," then I'm not the right person. So.
I think that because I see we're coming close to time. I think that actually is a good point to kind of conclude on, because I think what we are trying to do with our project and what we just learned from you through your presentation, Sheila, is the importance of telling a story, right? And that I think with all art, it's not all art is for everyone, right? And we as art historians, we definitely know that, and artisans and art administrators know that. But the ones that do tell a story, and for those who appreciate it or are looking for it or happen to stumble upon it and fall in love with it, that's why we keep doing what we're doing, right? That's why your work is I'm sure loved by many people, and I'm so glad that I got a chance to experience it in person, and look forward to seeing the one in New York when I go to New York again, because I go searching for those subway art. But I'm hoping that we're able to do that here in our county when time comes, that we will have the permanent structures that will tell the story of the women whose stories need to be told, right? Yeah. Just like the janitor and the woman who taught people how to sew. That's incredibly important, just as important as a city council member and so forth.
But I also learned a lot from that one in the step, because who knew that the poets were going to adopt a project like that, and it's actually there. That's only mine is only one. There are actually other things around it that each of the students did, but I figured I didn't want to take too much time to explain absolutely everything, because I worked in the factory, the concrete factory, with the students on their parts of it. Like one of them wanted to have a cat that was in Pushkin's story. They said, why don't you have one part, the cat coming in, and the other one, the tail, so that you think there was more than one cat. Helping them think through what their parts were, so that they would have another idea than just putting a cat there. Because everyone's passing through. This is a passageway. This is not someplace where people spend a lot of time. They're walking up the steps into the building.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sheila. I'm so glad we got a chance to do this.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. And let's connect. Please stay on so we can chat after.
Well, I hope to be on the West Coast again.
Yes. And then when I go back to the East Coast, I'll definitely have to connect with you. Absolutely. So
take care. Stay well.
Same to you. And I just want to.
By the way, if you ever want to have a necklace like this, just go to a hardware store, get a eye bolt, and you have to put a little glue, otherwise it'll work itself out.
Yes. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.